Welcome again, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on how top colleges review applications. My name is Callie Jacobs, and I am part of the QuestBridge team working on student outreach. And I'm delighted to be here to explore this topic and really delve into what happens after you hit submit on an application. So in this session, we will have the opportunity to hear from admissions representatives from 3 of our college partners about how they evaluate college applications. And yes, it is real people reading your applications. Our panelists will demystify the admissions process and provide you with an insider's look at selective admissions, sharing their thoughts on what has made applicants stand out, particularly in the QuestBridge National College Match. As we think about today's event, I do have some prepared questions for our panelists, and I will make sure to leave time toward the end for any questions that you may have as well. So if you do have questions that are coming up for you, I encourage you to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to share your questions and upvote others. Please know that today's session is being recorded, and if you would like, you're able to turn on closed captions in your toolbar as well. So let me show you who is joining us today, and I will invite them up to the screen to share a bit about themselves. Now, I know we all might be a little bit squished right now as I have our slides up and our videos, but I wanted to bring everyone up here for quick introductions. So I will ask folks if you could please share your name, role, the college you're representing, how long you've been reading applications, and a favorite fun fact about your school. And Sean, I will pass it over to you. You are first on my screen.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. My name is Sean Ashburn. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at Tufts University, located in Greater Boston, Massachusetts. I've read applications at Tufts for about 8 years. And a favorite fact about our school, a special quality about Tufts, is our mascot. Our mascot, Jumbo the elephant, lived from about 1860 to the mid-1880s. He was a major attraction in the London Zoo and then traveled around North America with Barnum and Bailey's circus. And Jumbo's name is what popularized the use of the term jumbo in the English language. So anytime you order something that's jumbo sized or buy something that's jumbo sized, you're actually talking a little bit about Tufts.
That's so fun. I didn't realize that. I'll have to keep that in mind the next time I order something. Amethyst, can I pass it over to you?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Amethyst Black. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently Deputy Director of Access and Institutional Excellence at Rice University in Houston, Texas. I've been reading applications for about 9 years on this side of the desk. Prior to my time at Rice, I served at multiple high schools in Houston where I was advising and counseling students through the college application process. So helping students write applications and now reading applications on this side. Something that I really enjoy about Rice, outside of Rice being in the heart of the city of Houston, but really the heart of the Rice experience is the residential college experience. And as a result, Rice doesn't have a traditional Greek life, but we have 11 residential colleges, and our students have a place to belong from the very first day that they're on campus. And it really helps our students feel connected and really welcome them into our culture of care. So I love the Rice residential college system.
Thank you. And Patty, will you wrap us up?
Yes, my name is Patty Amador-Laxon. I'm a Senior Associate Director of Admission at Grinnell and Coordinator of Strategic Partnerships. I have been at Grinnell College for 17 years and have been reading applications throughout that time. prior to moving to Iowa, I was an attorney practicing law in DC and California. So I lived all over. I am a first generation college student. And I think college is an amazing experience for those of us who will be the first in our families to go to college. A fun fact about Grinnell is that a lot of student activities are really student driven. And one of my favorite activities is the student-led drag show. They have been doing this for about 20 years. There is a drag show every semester. They invite faculty and staff to attend. They put us in our own little section, which is probably a good thing, I think. And they always donate the money that they raise to LGBTQ plus organizations. So fun fact about Grinnell, you can be part of this student-led drag show. And if you appear in more than 3 drag shows, you get your very own golden Barbie.
Wow. I feel like every time I hear about these fun facts at colleges, I want to go. I want to go to each of your schools now and spend 4 years on your campuses. Thank you all so much for being here with us today and being open to sharing your insights and expertise with the College Prep Scholars as we talk about how colleges review applications, because this can be a very confusing and maybe even kind of mysterious sort of process. And as we think about perhaps a first question, I'm wondering if you could just initially help us demystify the process for our students by sharing a bit about what actually happens after your office receives a QuestBridge application. And Sean and Amethyst, I'm wondering if you two could touch on this. What does that process look like for your institutions?
Amethyst, would you like me to start? Okay, sure. The first thing, before I even talk about how we read applications, is that we need your application to be complete. So actually what happens first is that we send you a link, an automated email with a link to set up your applicant status portal, like a tracker, a place you'll log in for each individual school that you've shared your application with, to log in and view a checklist of the admissions materials that the school has received and the admissions materials we're missing. And we also have a financial aid checklist in there too. So we'll need you to submit additional financial aid materials during the match process to allow our financial aid team to evaluate your eligibility as well. So actually what happens first is kind of this processing step to make sure that you log in and activate that portal and that we have all of the missing materials we need to have a completed application. Some QuestBridge partner colleges, including Tufts, may have extra steps to complete your application. In our case, we have a short, very, very short questionnaire, a form that we ask during the match process for students to let us know really 2 important things. One, which school or program at Tufts would you like to be considered for? So our university is divided into a few undergraduate schools, so we need to know that when you apply. And we ask, do you want us to consider your SAT and ACT scores or not? So we have this very short questionnaire that we need you to complete. And once you do that, then your application is ready for review. A bit about our process. So like some of my other colleagues, we use a committee-based evaluation process where typically 2 admissions staff members come together and review applications as a pair with a focus on certain schools, states, or regions together collectively. And then applications that are the strongest that they wish to move forward will be reviewed and discussed by another committee, another small group of staff members. And we sort of move competitive applications through several different rounds as we work towards deciding which students to offer admission to.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Rice's process is very similar to Tufts' process in that way, where we send not only a checklist out, making sure that the student's file is complete, and also encouraging students to submit any other additional information or supplemental responses that we may have students submit on to Rice if they're interested in the match. But then beyond that, we really encourage students to really take time to engage with us. Rice, during the match process, will have a number of opportunities to engage with admission officers or submit any updated information. And the more information you have available to share, the better. The more context we have to review files and to really evaluate your candidacy for admission, the better it is for the process. Rice also does practice a committee-based evaluation process. And so at Rice, there are 2 admission officers making a decision on a file from the very beginning, which is really great since students oftentimes on the road, when I encounter them, they often ask, how are files truly reviewed? And so I can say with full certainty at Rice, we do have the territory manager leading the discussion, but we also have an additional admission officer there adding additional context or perspective to the conversation, and then files are passed on throughout the process. But students really should take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves in the file to really provide additional context, because that's helpful for admission officers.
Absolutely. So a few important takeaways here, students, right? Make sure that you're submitting all your materials so that your applications are complete. And not only will the colleges help ensure that you have all the necessary materials submitted, but also QuestBridge will do that too, right? We will be sending you reminders, and as you work through your application, there's badges that you can earn along the way as you complete various components of your application. And then another important piece is, just providing that context and making use of this space so that as your application is submitted and sent along for review, the readers have that information, because we heard a little bit about, various perspectives, or, this holistic review, which I think is something that we can dig into a little bit more. And Patty and Sean, I'll ask you this next one, but this idea of holistic review is something that we hear often. And I'm curious if you can expand a little bit on that. Like, what does it mean to review an application holistically at your admissions office? What are you actually hoping to learn when you're reading a QuestBridge application? Patty, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you. So the term holistic review essentially means that we are looking at the application in its entirety in order to make decisions with respect to admission. So there isn't any one thing that is going to make you admissible in your application. We are considering everything that you submitted, and then making an evaluation based on the whole application. So holistic is the whole application. And I think that when we are thinking about an applicant, we're thinking about a number of things. We're thinking about success for the most part. Like, is the student prepared to succeed in our academic environment? What we want to make sure is that we are bringing students to campus who are going to thrive, who are really going to take advantage of the opportunities that we have available. And so we are thinking about not just GPAs, but about the entire transcript. What kinds of courses were available to you? How did you do in those courses? Your letters of recommendation really matter to us because they tell us not just what you were like in the classroom as a student, but what you're like in community with other people. We are really interested in your activities because they tell us not just that you're invested in your home community, but that you can be trusted in an unstructured academic environment because you've already learned how to manage a lot of different activities through your extracurriculars. So we are looking at the entirety of your application, thinking about where you came from, thinking about sort of the distance traveled between like where you started and where you ended as an applicant, and then making a decision all in about 8 minutes time.
Yeah, I think Patty said it very well. Typically when schools are using a holistic process, they're not using a a prescribed rubric or template of who's admitted and who's not based on only quantitative factors. What's most important, certainly for us, is that we're seeing evidence of academic preparation. All of our schools want you to be successful in our classrooms, and so we're looking for evidence of your readiness for a rigorous college environment in your application. And alongside that, we're looking for the individual perspectives, experiences, interests that you share, as Patty described. And also part of holistic review is that individual colleges make decisions based on their own individual missions, right? Each school will have their own values, their own culture, their own priorities that they sort of elevate in their selection process. And so the admission decision is a result of both the qualities in the application that you present and send forward, but also what the school is sort of looking for in terms of the cohort that they're trying to build.
Yeah. And both Sean and Patty talked a little bit about, these academic components and things like transcripts, coursework, GPA, class rank. All of these different pieces could be key components of an academic review. And I know that students often wonder, like, how important are these pieces? What do you hope to see when you're reviewing a transcript? And Amethyst and Patty, I'm wondering if you could kind of shed a little bit more light on this academic review and these various components and what you're really looking for.
Absolutely. I'm happy to start, Patty. I think oftentimes students may think about the transcript as having to be a flawless record or evidence of their success in high school. And while oftentimes institutions are looking for, as both Sean and Patty mentioned, evidence of a student's success in a rigorous environment, we also understand that life happens, right? And so if there is anything that perhaps was a disruption or caused a grade dip or some level of mishap that happened, it is important that students do share context for the admission committee to really understand the full totality of what that experience was. Beyond that, though, I think it's also important to for students to consider that admission officers, when evaluating transcripts, oftentimes, if available, will also be evaluating a school profile to provide additional insight onto what's available for that student within that school environment in particular. So oftentimes, admission officers will approach the transcript review with a careful idea in mind about what options the student has had in terms of course selection, what the student has attempted or which courses they've taken, and yes, of course, how they've performed in said courses. And so it's really a great tool, not only the transcript, but the school profile as well, to understand the complete story as to what's available for that particular student in that particular environment, careful not to really compare students against other students in other environments who may have additional access to different types of courses. And so that's oftentimes what admission officers are looking for, not only the courses that the student has taken and how they've performed, but that school profile, adding additional context into what's available for that student in that particular environment as well.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add is that something Amethyst touched on is that we're not focused on like a grade point average. We don't really focus so much attention on that cumulative grade point average that a lot of people are working really hard to achieve. We're thinking about trends over time. We're thinking about what you've done with the entirety of your academic career, including through your senior year. So a lot of this process, the match process, happens really early, but we still want to know what courses you're going to be taking in your senior year. And we're going to expect that you have continued to look for rigorous work, even up to graduation. So the trends over time are really important to us, particularly if you had kind of a rocky transition to high school, as many people do. So we are human, but we know that you are human, and we are trying to read everything in the best light possible.
Yeah, this idea that you're really trying to understand them, right? We talked a little bit about context before, and understanding that we are all human, right? And so we know that there's growth and progression and maybe some stumbles, but recoveries along the way. And so seeing that picture over time can be really helpful. Amethyst brought up the school profile. And I'm hoping that Amethyst and Sean can tackle this next one where we explore the school profile a little bit more. I'm not sure that everyone here is familiar with what a school profile is. So I'm wondering, can we talk a little bit about what the school profile is, what or how you use it in your review, and what students can do if they don't have one, because we know some schools don't. Sean, do you want to kick things off?
Yeah, sure. It's a summary of your high school. That's all you should really think of it as. So it might be 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, typically produced by a high school counseling or college advising or guidance office at your high school. That often most high school counselors will upload as kind of an attachment to a high school transcript. And as Amethyst was saying, the purpose there is for the reader, the recipient of the documents, to have a general understanding of what's been available at a given school, right? There are lots and lots of high schools around the country and around the world that we receive applications from. We know a lot of them, but we don't know every detail about all of them. And so the school profile helps us open up an application and familiarize ourselves with the size of the school, the community that attends that school, sort of representation of different backgrounds and identities there, and the curricular offerings, which are really, really important, right? We want to understand, are there advanced courses here? How are they labeled? Are they in every subject or only certain subjects? Are there limits to what students can pursue? Are there different ways that they might pursue advanced coursework, multiple options as far as, some high schools have a large AP program, others might encourage students to do early college or dual enrollment coursework. So we then try to understand within a given school what's been available, what could a hypothetical student have done in this community, then how can we evaluate an applicant's sort of academic achievement, pursuit of rigorous coursework relative to what's been available to them. Profiles also might tell us things like, how is a GPA calculated here? Does the school use class rank? And if so, how do they determine it? And we might also get a little bit of a sense of what kinds of colleges are students from this community going to. Are they going to mostly 4-year colleges, 2-year colleges, local institutions, public universities, private universities? Helps us know a little bit about the kind of community and whether we might have seen students from this school in the past in our applicant pool, or maybe this is a place where we are not as represented, and that might be an exciting opportunity for us to connect with a school and a community that doesn't know as much about our institutions. Amethyst, are there things you would add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I think yes, and in the absence of a school profile, I would say that there are tools that institutions do have at our disposal to learn more about the high school environment, the community even that the student is coming from, to help us understand a bit more about that student and the experiences that they may have had in that particular high school environment. For the student themselves, I wouldn't put the pressure on you as an applicant and as a student to try to come up with or create a school profile. That's not your role. But I think it is helpful, if your school does not have a school profile to share with an institution, for you to share some high-level information about perhaps your own academic journey. Oftentimes, I see students provide additional context in the education section by providing context in terms of any circumstances that they've experienced. Perhaps their school only allows sophomores or juniors to take AP courses if they're offered. Perhaps the school is really pushing that dual enrollment or dual credit offering that may be available. And so high-level information like that, that a student has experienced in a particular school environment, is helpful if the student does not have a school profile for their school to send us. And even if there is a school profile on file, it is also, I think, helpful for institutions to hear oftentimes from the student in their own voice, kind of what their educational progression has been and what their experience has been like overall. And so that's how institutions use it. We really want to get a full sense of the type of environment that you're coming from.
Definitely. And I think students, as you're thinking about the National College Match application in particular, we do try to provide these special additional information boxes for each section where you can elaborate on your experience or share any of those high-level components that could be helpful to understand kind of what you've been, what's been made available to you, how you're taking advantage of it, or if there have been any other circumstances that have come up along the way. One component of the academic review that we haven't really talked about yet is test scores. And so Sean and Patty, I'm hoping you can address this question about test scores, because testing is just an area that can cause a lot of questions or uncertainty. And while QuestBridge does not require test scores for the National College Match, meaning that students whose applications are otherwise still very strong can be selected as finalists without them, many students are unsure if they should submit their test scores to us or to colleges. What advice would you give to students who are kind of debating whether or not they should report their scores?
Thank you, Callie. I think test scores are really tough. For a lot of us, there is a big emphasis on doing well on these tests and achieving certain scores. We all hear that, in order to be like a national merit scholar, you need to achieve a certain score. And so there's this pressure to start taking and practicing and doing well on those tests from a really young age. But the reality is that we don't all take tests well. We don't all have the same preparation. We don't all have the same opportunity to prepare. And so it is really good to consider whether or not you want to burden yourself with test scores. Some colleges do require test scores in order to complete your application. Some colleges are test optional. If you're applying to test optional colleges, then do make sure to fill out the form that Sean referenced earlier. We're all going to have that form because we need to know whether or not we should be looking for a test score. So do look out for those forms. They're all going to be through the portal. And then really consider what your test score is going to say about you as a student when you are deciding whether or not to submit a test score. You don't necessarily have to compare yourself to the mid-50 range at the colleges that you're thinking about, and you don't have to hit a particular score in order to be admissible. The mid-50 range refers to the middle 50% of a class that is admitted to a college, and know that 25% of their admits are above that range, 25% are below that range. So when you see something called a mid-50 range, you're just looking at the middle 50% of an admitted class. Since schools went test optional, those ranges have gone up, because people who have better scores are going to be submitting those test scores. So I don't want people to get really stressed out about what's reported, because it could be that you with a score that is in the lower 25% range are actually achieving a test score that is much higher than the people within the context of your high school. So we are thinking about a lot of things when a student submits a score. We're not just relying on what our reported middle 50% range is. And it's a hard thing to think about. Sometimes you're going to be someone who is going to be super, super proud of a score, and then maybe you look at the mid 50 and you feel deflated. Don't do that. Don't do that. We are thoughtful in our evaluations, and we're going to be thinking about, where you are in the context of your school and what that score says about you. Sean?
No, Patty said it beautifully. I really don't have much to add. To the point around the increase in the averages for students, I work at a school that's been test optional for about 5 years. We're continuing to be test optional. As a result of about, roughly 50% of our applicants are students who are submitting scores, and about 50% are not. About 60% of our incoming students are students who are admitted with SAT or ACT scores, and about 40% are not. Because more than half of our, or nearly half of our students have been admitted without test scores, that has made the averages increase quite significantly. And to Patty's point, they can be very intimidating for students. So as a result, it so happens that our university decided to be a bit more transparent with some testing guidance on our website to essentially tell students that we feel that if you've earned over a 1300 on the SAT, math plus reading, we would recommend that you report that with your application. And the same is true if you score a 28 or higher on the ACT. We think that above those numbers would show evidence of preparation that might enhance your application, because we really felt a lot of anxiety for students who were feeling concerned about scores that were actually very strong, but they were withholding them because they looked a little bit low relative to our averages. And part of this has to do with Patty's point that some students are really scoring 200 to 300 points higher than the average of their senior cohort in their high school. And those are really impressive relative to peers who have had similar academic opportunities as you. They might look a little low compared to the averages at these very highly selective colleges, but if they're in still that strong range, well above the national average, above the averages in your communities, that actually could enhance your application.
So be proud of your accomplishments. Take a close look at the colleges that you're interested in and see if there's some additional, conversation that you might want to have or reflection as you think about your test scores. Now, I know we've spent a good portion of time on kind of the various academic components of an application, but I'd like to transition a little bit to activities, because while we love knowing what you all are doing inside the classroom, we also know that you're making meaningful contributions in other spaces. So Patty and Amethyst, I'm hoping you could share a little bit about activities. In our application, we ask students to list a handful of activities that they've been involved in throughout high school, as well as if they're engaged in any paid work or hold any significant family responsibilities. As you're thinking about an activity section, how can students maximize their use of this space?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think this is a fantastic question. Oftentimes, I will, when I'm on the road and talking to students may say, oh, well, I only do X, Y, and Z outside of the classroom environment. And I'm like, that's exactly what we want to learn about, right? So essentially maximizing the activity section, really taking a full look at all of the activities or all of the ways in which you spend your time outside of the classroom experience and detailing those and talking about those. On the admission side, we really get a sense of who you are, your creativity, your leadership skill set, the things that you're really passionate about, your resilience in some cases, how you've navigated systems and the level of influence or impact that you have. And that doesn't just mean within a traditional high school environment, but in the work environment or at home or in a number of different ways within your religious institutions or in other community aspects. And so that's what we're hoping that students really take the time to do and to detail as they're thinking about what impact and how they use their time in terms of their activities and really maximizing that section. Yes, it could be helpful to think about, when you've started and the progression you've had and perhaps the number of hours, so we get a sense of how much time a certain activity is taking, or for instance, in terms of work, how much time you're actually spending doing work. And that's really important for us to understand as well, and it provides greater insight into who you are as an applicant and possibly an individual as well. But I think that the activity section, truly one of my favorite parts outside of the essay and really all the parts, but I think the word that I keep hearing in so many of our responses is context, right? And it provides a different type of context into who you are and how you're spending your time and what really excites you. I always caution students, though, to do things that they are truly passionate about and not just subscribe to a standard list like, oh, I think that I'm supposed to have X amount of community service hours, or this sounds good, or I think colleges may really want to see this. But really pursuing things that you truly truly are passionate about, whether that's research or other academic or sports activities or a wide gamut of things that you may be interested in doing. Truly pursuing those things that bring you joy and that you're truly passionate about, and thinking about how you can illustrate your commitment to those involvements in the activity section.
So thorough. Thank you, Amethyst. I think the only thing I would add is that we recognize that not every school has the same opportunities available for students. You may go to a charter school that does not offer any kind of athletic activity. So don't feel stressed out if that's not something that you can put on your application. We're not looking for particular types of activities, really. We're just looking to see how you manage your time, and any activity that you engage in that takes away from your study time, whether it be babysitting or a part-time job. Some of you might even be working full-time jobs to help support your families. Those kinds of activities are the things that you should identify because they are demonstrating leadership in different capacities, which is something that we are all interested in. Remember, we're thinking about distance traveled. You may be at a school with a bunch of people who earn really great grades, but you might be the only one who has to work and babysit so that other people can work. And so you're traveling a longer distance, and the context that we've talked about, all of us, is what we're really trying to gauge. And the QuestBridge application provides a lot of opportunities to put your academic experience into the context of your life.
Thank you for sharing more about the activities section and how to make use of that. I know another piece, and Amethyst, this is one of your favorite pieces, though you did mention all of them, is the writing section. And that's a big component of not only the QuestBridge application, but many college applications as well. And our writing section is comprised of several short answer questions where students are asked to answer a question in about 35 words or so to a more traditional personal essay. Amethyst and Sean, I'm wondering, how should students approach writing? In your time as an admissions representative, what has stood out to you as a strong, compelling essay?
I'll jump in. I think immediately what comes to mind is authenticity. Just reading, answering the response or the prompt, right? So appropriately responding, but then also just being authentic. And oftentimes I may read writing that I can often tell maybe over edited or is just not in a typical 16, 17, 18-year-old's voice. And so I caution students, yes, you may have folks in your circle who you really trust their opinion. And yes, we do encourage you to have other folks look at, the submissions that you're sending to colleges, but don't edit out your voice. We truly want to hear what you think, and authenticity truly does matter. I've gotten a lot of questions on this topic as well, Tally, about AI tools. And oftentimes I encourage students to really think about AI tools as a way to organize your thoughts and not take away from obviously authenticity and truly your actual writing. Admission officers can tell stylistically, word choice, pattern, sentence structure. We've been doing this a bit, right? And we know. So if you're going to utilize AI tools, I encourage you to think about using them in the brainstorming process and maybe trying to organize your thoughts instead of a replacement for your voice. We truly want to hear your voice in response to those prompts.
I think that sometimes the desire to stand out can actually lead students down a path where they're feeling pressured to sort of present the most shocking or memorable content, when actually that might not serve them as well. At the end of the day, the goal of our essays are to understand the strengths that you could bring to our campus communities, right? So really a strategy to approach this is to identify 3 to 5 of the qualities or assets that you hold, things that you think you've developed as interests, strengths, skills, curiosities that you're going to bring with you in your transition to college. And some of them are going to be really simple. They're going to be things like concern for others or desire to make an impact. And that might not feel like the most unique characteristic, but what is going to be unique are the anecdotes, the stories you share about how you have developed or practiced or exhibited or demonstrated those strengths. And that's really what you should be writing about, right? It's not about sort of what's the most distinctive. It's actually what's the detailed, meaningful, specific anecdote I can tell about how I either developed or practiced or showcased this quality that is going to serve me well when I come to college, allow me to contribute, allow me to learn, allow me to build positive relationships. At the end of the day, like, you're applying to go to school and do homework and take classes for 4 more years. So a good kind of safety net to remember is that intellectual curiosity, a genuine love of learning, can be a good sort of safety net topic. It's something to always return to, right? If you look back at all the things you've written in your application and the reader doesn't have any information about your love of learning or the joy you have in the intellectual discovery, which doesn't necessarily mean you have to write about your major, just means that we want to know that there are topics, themes that you get really excited to learn about either independently or within the structure of a classroom. That can feel often like a good direction to go if you're getting stuck. But at the end of the day, like, your sort of maturity, your successes, your assets, your strengths, those are the things we want to understand. And it's up to you to find like the stories you can tell in those both short responses and long answers that help kind of illustrate or demonstrate how you've developed or practiced those qualities.
Wonderful. We've talked a lot about, illustrating, demonstrating context more broadly. And Patty, I'm hoping you can share just a little bit more about why context is so important. If we haven't drilled it home yet, I'm hoping we can do so here. In the QuestBridge application, we provide a number of opportunities for students to share additional information, whether it's kind of general additional information or particular to a certain section or component of their application, household, income and assets, academics, and so forth. So why is context so important? And could you maybe provide an example of what context could look like within an application?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really key to the QuestBridge application. I mean, I think what QuestBridge is doing is giving students a chance to really identify all the things that they have to do in order to achieve their academic success, in order to be like a great student and a leader in their high school. A lot of students, there are a lot of students who will apply to all of our colleges, and some of them come from really privileged backgrounds. And those students don't necessarily have to worry about setting aside time for studying or setting aside time to think about their college essays, because that is all built into their academic experience already. But if you're someone who is at a disadvantage for perhaps the neighborhood that you live in, or maybe the schools that you attend, or perhaps the structure and the dynamics of your family, you are having to do some more work just to maybe get to school. Just to ensure that you have the books that you need, or the opportunities to take advantage of dual enrollment coursework or AP coursework or IB coursework. But we won't know any of that just looking at a transcript. We're not going to know any of that if you don't explicitly tell us about that. You don't want any of us to guess about your life. You want us to know what it's like to walk in your shoes. I've used this analogy before about the distance traveled. There's a difference between someone who runs, a 100-yard dash and someone who is competing on the cross-country team. They're all like really great runners, but they're getting to the finish line in many different ways. And so we need you to tell us what your distance traveled is. We won't know unless you make it explicit. We will see your transcript, and unless you tell us about all the extra hoops that you had to jump through in order to achieve the grades that you achieved, then we're not going to be able to give you the full evaluation that you deserve. So use all the opportunities that you have to write, not just to demonstrate that you're a great writer and to tell us about your beautiful personalities, but to share with us what it's been like to walk in your shoes through your high school career. We see a lot of really beautiful people come through the QuestBridge application process, and that is why we all participate as institutions in QuestBridge. Not every school is a QuestBridge school, but I think the ones that are ones that are really interested in understanding what things are like for a population of students that qualifies for QuestBridge.
Okay, well, hopefully it's clear how important context is and how to take advantage of that throughout your application. I have one more question just before we go to the open Q&A about an area of the application that we have yet to talk about, which is recommendations. And Sean, I'm hoping you can share your perspective here. Within the QuestBridge application, we require 2 teacher recommendations and a counselor recommendation or school report. And as students start to think about who to ask to be a recommender, what guidance can you provide them on who to select, who to ask, and ultimately what you're hoping to learn from a recommendation?
Yeah. Firstly, many of our colleges are interested in letters of recommendation from core academic instructors. So that's something to know, and you might look at each school's website individually and see if they have any guidance. Some schools are even more specific about academic disciplines than that. But at the end of the day, we should be focused on teachers you've had in high school level courses in English, math, natural and physical sciences, history and social science, and language. Those are sort of core academic disciplines that are most similar to what you'll encounter at our institutions, which are all liberal arts colleges and research universities that focus on liberal arts. So that's important. Beyond that, it's really similar to what I answered before when I talked about essays, which is where is the substance, where are the detailed anecdotes going to come through? So I would recommend asking teachers who you think have the most concrete examples that they can offer in the letter that would highlight your intellectual contributions. So your engagement, your ideas, your enthusiasm, your love of learning, maybe sort of significant products or projects you've contributed to the class. Maybe you facilitated a really great class discussion about a particular text, or you did a really robust research project with a class presentation that the teacher would be able to reference and think really highly of. And also, they would also hopefully share something about your character in the classroom, right? How do you collaborate with others? How do you support your peers? How do you sort of build up the mutual or collective success of that space? So really, you're looking to teachers, maybe who you had in an advanced course, or maybe who taught you in a favorite subject. But most importantly, independent from those things, it should be the person who you think has the most little nuggets, little gems of detailed anecdotes to be able to describe and paint a picture of how you've added to that classroom environment.
So I know that we are approaching the end of our time together. And so before we fully depart, I would love to get each of your thoughts on just one piece of advice you would give to students as they are preparing for their college applications. So feel free to go in any order that you'd like, but I'd love for each of you to chime in on sharing that one pearl of wisdom.
This will not seem that wise, but it's actually to complete the procedural steps that come with this process, right? So I'll give some examples. So we every year have students who have ranked our university in the National College Match, who we actually have read their applications and we're really excited about them, but they're missing a key piece of information. Often that's the CSS profile or copies of the family's taxes or some other thing along the way that we haven't received. Maybe it's a counselor letter of recommendation. And so when students are missing key elements, we send them lots and lots and lots of reminder emails. And sometimes they still never submit those materials. And then we really can't consider those students fully in the process. And maybe that means they're not actually as excited about our school. So it shouldn't be so heartbreaking for me, but it can be anyway. And so I think, if you're going to commit to this process and enter a list of schools and rank them in the match, then our hope is that you'll follow through to the last stage for all of those schools and get everything submitted. So that's one thing I'll say. The other is sort of to think really critically about how you're showcasing your strengths through the application process. It can be really easy, especially there's some, I think, myths online, and I look at the QuestBridge Reddit page sometimes. I know sometimes there's guidance around really leaning into challenges, to hardship, to difficult experiences we've had, which do inform who we are. But at the end of the day, we're looking for students who showcase some of the strengths that they'll bring to our campus, like curiosity, like a desire to make an impact, like a desire to build positive relationships. And so if you have a choice between where to emphasize who you are in your writing, I would lean towards those assets.
Yes, I will. I will encourage students to think about this process, since I know that there's so much that oftentimes goes into this process, and it can be a heightened process, emotionally heightened process for a lot of students. But know that there is oftentimes many individuals on the other side reading your application and really eager to learn more about you and the contributions that you are hoping to make, not only to our campuses, but to the world. And that's such an honor as an admission officer. I can't think of too many other professions where students are so vulnerable with us and share much of their past, much of their current circumstances, much of what they hope to achieve in the future, and do so in an authentic and real and genuine way. And we understand that, and we're hopeful along with you, and we're excited actually to learn more about you throughout this process. So as heightened as this process can feel, as stressful as sometimes some of the elements may seem to be, just know that there are an excited group of professionals on the other side that truly are rooting for you and hoping to help you succeed in this one aspect of your journey. And if you're not as successful as you hope to be, it's not the end of the world, right? Everything happens as it's supposed to. And so understand that people are excited, people are encouraged to learn more about you throughout this process, and more about your promise and what you hope to share with us. We're eager to really, really learn more.
I think I just want you all to take a really deep breath and understand how special you all are. College admission is it is so fraught, and we all wish that we could make it as like stress-free as possible, but it is just stressful. Understand that not making a match does not necessarily mean that you aren't an incredible human person. We are all making decisions in really short amounts of time under incredible pressure, and sometimes we get it wrong. So take a deep breath. Know that there are a lot of institutions where you can be super, super happy. And if you don't get into your top choice, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get into a school that is going to provide you with the opportunities to be the successful person that you're going to be. And good luck. You can call on any of us to ask for help. We all stand ready to work with you throughout this process, even if we're not your top choice school.
I think that's such a great reminder that there are so many people here to support you along the way, whether it is folks within your particular community, school, to the team here at QuestBridge, and the wonderful team members at each of our college partners. We all offer a variety of resources and supports to help you along your college journey. But I wanted, again, to just thank everyone here. Students, please join me in thanking our panelists for all of the advice and wonderful insights that they provided about not only their institutions, but the application process as a whole. They, like us at QuestBridge, are excited to review your applications in a couple of months. So keep an eye on your email for when the National College Match application is launched. It'll be soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Take good care.